And what's going on, guys? Alex here, and today I would like to discuss the new iPad Pro M4. And unfortunately, even on paper, it is even worse than we could thought. First of all, Mr. Who's the Boss video on iPad M4 told us that there is lots of lags with third-party accessories, like for example MX Master mouse keeps disconnected, the same as laggy keyboard.
Mr. Cook, my mouse was not working.
Wow.
The scroll wheel was incredibly laggy and unresponsive, like unusably so. So I was having to scroll by clicking and dragging across the page like some unstoppable moron. But to top it all off, I keep disconnecting. Can you imagine my reaction when I realized that the same thing was happening to my keyboard?
So essentially, unresponsiveness is one of the flaws of the new iPad Pro. Of course, it's important to mention that the accessories, original accessories for iPad Pro M4, which were released also with the new iPad, they also had some major flaws. For example, Magic Keyboard, the new Magic Keyboard for Apple iPad Pro M4, it has a little bit of flaw, which is the top is too heavy than the bottom. So that's why the iPad has a very big risk of being dropped.
It's this. Any single time I touch it, the entire iPad rocks. This is the old one. It's not doing any sort of seesawing action. Here's one for the smaller iPads. Same thing. It's not rocking. But watch this. And the reason that happens is because the hinge doesn't actually sit on the table. There's a bit of a gap. You didn't have that with the older ones. The hinge sat on the table, so there was no rocking motion.
But the software problems could be changed during an iPadOS update. What you cannot say about the Apple Magic Keyboard, since it has already released on the market, and right now we have a pretty shitty keyboard for $300. Another thing is mostly to the all iPads Pro released, not only iPad M4, is that iPadOS is not a professional software. The iPad stands somewhere in between from the iPhone and MacBook, and right now with the pricing of a MacBook with a really professional device, you receive a big iPhone with some functionality of Samsung Galaxy S Ultra. For example, you can, the same as before, you can write, you can scribble, you can draw on your iPad, but unfortunately that's the only thing which you can do professionally, since the video editing software such as DaVinci Resolve is still a little bit cut from the original version for MacBook or your PC.
It's fully compatible with Desktop Resolve. I can open all my projects. I can play really large files smoothly. This is 6K ProRes 4444. It has the full cut page. It's even compatible with the speed editor. The color page features color management. You can even use ACES. All the tools and effects are here. Noise reduction, no problem. Film emulation, no problem. You can export it as a file or directly to your social media platform of choice.
So you're left with the cutout version of the original and pretty good software. So in my personal opinion, it would be better to pay more and get a MacBook Air with M3 or a MacBook Pro M2. Better for everything it would be, besides gaming and content consumption, since iPad is more meant for content consumption, since it's essentially a big iPhone. Of course, you can create content with an iPad, but as I said before, it has very cut-off software. So essentially, it's not for the content creation meant to be, like fully, so that's why you should consider a professional device as, for example, a MacBook or a Windows PC, which will be even better if you would consider such price point as iPad Pro M4 for 12.9 inches plus all of the accessories like Apple Pencil Pro and Magic Keyboard, the second iteration. The next thing is the cameras on the iPad. Of course, people who are filming on their iPads are pretty odd for me personally, because, oh come on, you have an iPhone, you have a phone itself, you can have a pretty good mirrorless camera for the price of the tenth of the iPad, but still people may use it. So Apple has added a raw video filming format in camera, in the main and only camera for iPad Pro, which is totally useless since on iPhone, theoretically you can add it to a gimbal and you can film something when you are walking and you can actually use it as a professional device, semi-professional, as Apple has shown it in its commercials, but still you get the raw version on an iPad, which is pretty dumb and it's pretty worthless, so it's just a gimmick for a gimmick. Also, it's important to mention that comparing to the previous version of iPad Pro, both 11 and 13 inches, you do not have the ultra-wide camera. Apple decided to hide it a little bit using the LiDAR scanner, but still you can see that there is only one camera compared to the previous iPad Pro, which had wide and ultra-wide camera, same as LiDAR scanner. So the modern modeling seems to be a little bit odd, since Apple has iPad Air, which also costs pretty a lot, but doesn't have the main feature of iPad Pro, which is 120Hz screen, which Apple calls ProMotion. So essentially, if 120Hz isn't so important for you, you can choose your iPad Air, and the iPad Air on M2 will be as powerful and it will be more than enough for your everyday usage, since the editing, as I said before, on an iPad is pretty dumb since you have your computer with more adequate software. Now talking about the iPad's construction, the Apple has told us that the iPad Pro M4 is the thinnest device they have ever created, which also shows us that they do not learn from their mistakes of an iPhone 6 Plus when they have made pretty thin body and which had bending capabilities. Of course, Apple has added, on its horizontal edges, it has added a little bit of ribs, which doesn't allow you to bend your iPad very easily, but the vertical bending still persists and it is permanent. So essentially, if you will sit on your iPad, it will bend even from the lightest touch. Also, from Jerry Everything video, which you can see right now, you can notice that Nano Glass, which is available on the top of the line iPad Pro versions with 1 or 2 terabytes of storage, has permanent damage on level 3 compared to level 5 on the regular glass, because the Nano Glass is very fragile. And talking about the Nano Glass, if you want it, you can get it for even iPad mini if you would buy a paper-like screen protector, which actually adds you almost the same functionality, but you can change it and it's screen protector, not the screen itself, which repair would cost simply a lot. Continuing to talk about the body of the iPad, because of its thinness, you have a much worse battery. You have less capacity of the battery, and it's okay because the software and M4 processor is very good optimized for iPad M4, but still the battery would degrade for over time, and then you would be left with less capacity than it would be simply possible. So if they would make it 1 or 2 millimeters thicker, there would not be such problems as easy bending, and of course there would not be such problems as the battery capacity in future, since the battery degrades from the day 1 of the production. For now it holds its power pretty good, but what would happen to you after a year or two, it's a big question. Also, I need to talk about iPad Pro M4, about the chip M4. They have skipped the M3 chip for their iPad and they have gone from the M2 to M4 already, but what I can tell you is that it's overpowered for its functionality. M2 was even more than enough than you could even think of, but right now you have M4, and what would you do on M4? Essentially, you can say that you will be drawing. Drawing is also available on iPad mini with the A14 if I recall correctly, and even on iPad Air, which also right now has M2. There is no such problem with drawing. If you said that you would edit your videos, like, come on, let's be real, you can edit even videos on your iPhone, which doesn't have M4, M2 or M3 processor. LumaFusion is all for you. So the thing is that even MacBooks right now have only M3 processor, so it's top of the model and it handles the things perfectly. There is no flaws, there is no problems, and there was no need to add such functionality to this device since it's not meant to be like computer. iPad is essentially a big iPhone. Also, one of the things which is important for me as European Union citizen is that European models doesn't come with a charging brick compared to the US version.
Apple is fighting back against the EU, and not gonna lie, it's kinda petty. Because the brand new M4 iPad Pro that Apple just released, along with the brand new M2 iPad Air, don't come with a charger in the box, but only for the EU and the UK. No, seriously, if you buy one of these iPads outside of the EU or the UK, like Australia or the US, you do get a charger in the box. But in the UK, and countries like France, which are in the EU, you get no charger in the box. Now, the EU has been causing Apple a lot of strife, like forcing Apple to adopt USB-C on the iPhone or forcing Apple to have third-party app stores on the iPhone as well. And this move from Apple really stinks of malicious compliance because, you know, they didn't have to do this, but they did. But this may all be due to a new regional law called the Waste from Electrical and Electronic Equipment, also called WEEE. Now, I'm not saying that there isn't a genuine reason for Apple to do this against e-waste, but at the same time, this seems to be Oddly convenient for some very petty revenge. And the worst part is that their customers in Europe have to pay the price.
And last but not least, let's talk about the screen. I have talked about matte glass finish on the Pro iPad on the top of the line versions, but of course the screen is now better. Now it has tandem OLED version, but what I can tell you is that if you need only true deep blacks, then you can go with iPad Pro previous year model with M2 processor, which will be more than enough, since I have one and it's more than enough for everything I throw at it, but you would have not OLED but mini LED. Mini LED essentially goes the same way, it has pretty good black colors, and what I can tell you for sure is that this iPad is more than enough for any professional or semi-professional activity. Also talking about mini LED also has great colors, the same as on every iPad, it has XDR quality, so if you're gonna use it without any paper-like screen protector, the screen will be very bright, but if you would like a matte texture like I do, you will add a screen protector which you could remove at any time, and you would get the matte screen as with nano glass texture, but which will not impact the fragility of this device. All in all, I can tell you that if you would like to get a new iPad, I would highly recommend you to go with the M2 version of the iPad Pro, the previous year's model, or if you're going to do lots of content creation, lots of work with the device, then I'd recommend you to go with MacBook Air for example, on the previous year MacBook Pro. Since it has much more functionality, the power is pretty much the same, and MacBook Pro even has active cooling on the device, which is highly important in lots of tasks, in lots of professional tasks. But if you would like to get an iPad, I would say that iPad Pro the previous year would be simply great, but still if you would like to use the Apple Pencil Pro, which it works only with the new iPads, then Apple iPad Air would be more than enough for you if you would like just to use it for content consumption and like slightly drawing or for school, for example. And that's it for me, thank you for joining in. All of the videos which I have mentioned will be linked in the description down below so you can check it out, and thank you for joining in once again, see you next time.